Positive outcomes for private enterprise and the climate are often discussed as a zero-sum game. From my experience, this is an us versus them mentality. In some form, from the Hayshed to Collins Street, from regulators to activists. Tonight, I will be discussing how the risks and opportunities faced by private enterprise can act as a force for good. As Darcy said, we should not need to provide incentives for private industry, but it does play a role in an actionable way of getting to net zero and a more sustainable climate. So, a bit about me. As Lynn said, I grew up on a farm. This is my old bus stop in Seymour during the 2022 floods. That is metres, plural, of water that completely decimated the centre of town. And this is me, a commerce student. I wrote my honours thesis with two of Australia's major regulators about banking and financial stability. And through the Wattle Fellowship, I wanted to converge my two loves of climate and economics. So what did I do? And coming from a rural background, carbon credits seemed like a really natural way of looking at this. And I had this image of my farmer grandfather so forefront of my mind, of someone who might need an incentive in order to take on agricultural practices that could make the world a better place. So through Wattle, I was able to do some work with our fantastic Department of Agriculture and study this. What I came to learn was that there is huge opportunity in this space. The number of projects done for soil carbon and agriculture-derived carbon credits is one of the fastest growing we have, and yet the total number of credits that exist that come from soil carbon and agriculture is quite small. Unfortunately, there is a significant degree of a lack of sophistication in the carbon market. It is generally agreed that the cost of a tonne of carbon emitted in the atmosphere is about $80 for a social cost, and yet these are sold at about $30 to $32. The market lacks sophistication and it lacks significant scale and investment for it to act as a necessary form of incentive. So I was a bit disheartened. I'd learnt a lot, and in truth, it became apparent that what we needed was political and regulatory reform, which I am not an expert in, but regulation and the study of regulation is something I do know a fair bit about. So I moved on to my second love, being broader economic and financial stability. And I come back to Seymour and those floods, and I look at the business owners and the homeowners whose livelihoods were turned upside down because of the climate crisis. And I looked at the insurance market, and in what is currently a highly inflationary environment, it is insurance costs that are increasing greater than anything else. Yet this is not Woolworths. The profits that come from housing insurance have never been lower. Owning a home is getting more expensive, but homes themselves are becoming less valuable because of the climate. What is currently a climate crisis risks becoming a financial crisis as well as a climate crisis. So, from this, there are massive repercussions for both the banking and insurance markets. Banks require insurance over most homes. Homes are becoming less affordable and yet increasingly more adversely affected by the climate. But should we care? Should we care that insurers are less profitable, that banks are more risky, and homeowners are more exposed to climate risk? Well, for one, it puts all of us under systematic risk. And secondly, with these financial assets at risk, it is those who have control over the flow of capital, the insurance market and the banking market, now have an incentive to redirect money away from carbon intensity and towards net zero. Just last week, or just earlier this week, ANZ announced there will be no further investment into the expansion of fossil fuels. So, in summary, yes, it is very difficult for farmers to make money from carbon credits. Banks and insurance firms are increasingly paying for the cost of the climate crisis. But should we care? Does it matter that private enterprise is now struggling under the weight of greater forces in climate change? Well, I would argue that yes, it does. That what was traditionally an us versus them, that was regulators against banks, activists against farmers, is no more. We all have an incentive to engage with and better the climate crisis. What we need to do is find the common ground. Thank you.